Hi, I'm Joe DiVanna, and welcome to another session of the Møller Institute's Insight Series. Today, I'm talking with Paul Browne, an expert in financial services and legal services, and we're talking about the essentials of leadership. Paul, how are you? Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
For sure, absolutely. I was 21 years in banking with Barclays and Standard Chartered, doing M&A, strategy, crisis management, and running big chunks of businesses, and then switched over to the working with law firms, both as a consultant and I've run small firms as a CEO and a COO, CFO, and on the professional service explaining company.
Oh, well, bring it. Well, and speaking of crisis, you may have noticed there's a big crisis happening around us as we speak. One of the things that we've been sort of chatting about is, what are some of the essential skills, that leaders need to have, in today's very rapidly changing, economic environment.
Sure. I think there's a number of really key essentials. I think clarity of strategy is a really important one, but to sort of misquote St. Paul, clarity is not enough. You would need to basically not just have a situation saying, this is where we're going. I've seen too many CEOs and managing partners come up with a strategy and then say, here to the top 150 people, this is where we're going. Normally starts with transport metaphors, the train's leaving the station, you're on the plane or off it, and then come back 18 months later to talk about why nothing has happened. And that pure top-down approach doesn't work anymore. You need to go top-down and then talk to the people who are dealing with the clients, talk to the people actually doing the work, and do a top-down, bottom-up approach so that you both give them that clarity of strategy, but allow them to co-create the strategy and implementation going forward. And that does a number of things. One, it begins to move away through the permafrost of the middle management, which in many companies blocks change. And secondly, it builds an ethos and releases the energy of all the people who are dealing with the clients. So that rather than just dialing in a day and being sort of 20%, 50%, people are over 100% motivated. And you also begin the process of building change into the DNA. So people look at their particular work and say, I can improve this in line with the strategy by doing this and that, and brick by brick by brick by brick, you build a cumulative change and you begin a culture of driving that forward.
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges that leaders face today is you correctly identified this permafrost of middle management, which resist change, in any way. They want to maintain the status quo, and it's primarily because the leaders haven't given them the right incentives, for change. And some of the companies that I've worked with in the past, the ones who want to make the real change are the ones who are realizing that in the next 18 months they're going out of business, and suddenly everybody's motivated, because the ship is, as you were saying, they're on the plane, the engine just fell off. Now what? But creating these motivations, leaders need to, I think, give that middle management group context. What does this change mean to your operations, to your customers, to your suppliers, all of that? I think that's sometimes the missing element, is not being able to give them the right context of what this change means.
Absolutely. And by involving them in that change, that you're co-creating it, you can begin to move that forward so that they can define what this means to them in their individual office, in their area, and so forth. And it means that you can actually move forward and collaborate in a way that is going to be crucial going forward. Because what I'm seeing at the moment is more and more difficulty, for example, getting in new clients. It's always tough, but when you're restricted because of COVID-19, very difficult. And so working with each other and collaborating in line with the strategy is going to be crucial. And you need the right metrics, you need the right reward and recognition. And crucially, you need to be talking to the clients and saying, what are your needs? What are the things you really need? And then operating as the director of an orchestra to deliver those needs to them. And we're seeing a beginning of that in some private client work, where people are finding out the needs of the clients and then saying, yeah, I've got someone that can help them. But that is going to be a key success factor for firms who are going to emerge as winners from this crisis.
Yeah, I think the whole collaborative process, is something that that some organizations hide behind. I'll give you a good example of this. There's a bank here in the UK. I have accounts, in about 17 countries in this bank. And I went to my local branch before COVID-19 hit and asked a simple question: how much money do I have in your bank? And they couldn't answer the question. They said, well, we can't see past our own UK operations. I said, yes, but you have a product here where me as a customer, I can push a button, I can see all of my accounts. Why can't you? And they looked at my laptop and they said, where did you get that software? Just from your bank, And it was amazing how a customer could see across the organization and look at where they had deposits and stuff. But the individuals inside the bank can't do that, because of all these barriers that have been put up, between the different organizations. And lots of times they hide behind, well, the regulatory structure won't allow us to do that. So I asked them a very simple question: show me the regulation. And nobody can produce that either, So it's funny how organizations talk about collaboration, but when you break it down into the actual business processes, you get these functional silos that are just impenetrable, and we often equate this to human nature. That's how organizations behave, but not really. I mean, leaders need to actively uncouple those things and then put them back together in a way, where collaboration is part of a natural process instead of, a resistant process.
Absolutely, and the big change program I led at Barclays is all about breaking down the silos and joining up the bank and taking that forward. And if I look at, for example, some of the law firms, the really high margins are in the cross-jurisdictional, complex international matters where clients need a team working together. And too few law firms really deliver that. If I look at law firms across the way, there's very little correlation between size of law firm and profitability per lawyer. You get these huge law firms that are operating often, sadly, as multi-jurisdictional franchises. And from the client perspective, that's not what they need. If you look at someone like a Slaughters and May, they are operating in a joined up way and looking to sell the skills, the talent, the experience of that firm to help the client and help the client sorting out. And so you build multiple bonds of loyalty between that client and the firm. You begin to pull together those talents to solve the problems and solve the issues that maybe the client didn't even realize that they had. And I think that's going to be a massive, important thing in the future.
So for leaders who are watching this today, what do you think are 2 or 3 essential skills that they need to develop in order to get through this transition over the next few years?
Well, I think particularly the first phase of this crisis, people did a great job at the crisis management. It maybe appeals to something in the British character, particularly, of dealing with a crisis. But I think we're now moving to the next phase. And so what do the leaders want to do? Firstly, they've got to be visible. They've got to be visible and open to their people. Secondly, they've got to deliver a strategy. And what we're seeing at the moment is the acceleration of a series of trends that were happening already. The move, for example, from buying in the high street to buying online, the digitization of processes, the fact that people can work really effectively from home. And you're seeing this huge acceleration going forward. So firms and banks need to be aware of what are the things that are that future and sit on that wave. So, for example, I did a lot of work with Standard Chartered back in the early 90s, where Standard Chartered at that stage was all things to all men in all countries. Big network in Europe, big network in the States, big network in the UK. We exited those UK, USA, continental Europe networks to focus on China, India, Asia, Middle East, and Africa. because of the big forecast growth in Asia. Not many firms are doing that at this stage. And so from the CEO perspective, firstly, where are you going to take those calculated risks to harness and surf those waves of the future? Secondly, having identified that, to do a top-down, bottom-up approach to your people so that your people understand what you're aiming to do. But this is not doing strategy to them, it's doing strategy with them and saying, how can this work if you're sitting in Mumbai? How can this work if you're sitting in New York? So that you help build what the reality is and how they can help the clients. And finally, it's about pulling together teams that complement you. Some of the best CEOs that I've worked with have been people who have maybe been brilliant at charismatic leadership on stage, but terrible at analysis. But they surrounded themselves with bright people who could deliver those flaws and analysis skills so that you had a really rounded management team. And teams which have that diversity of talent, of outlook, of experience, of nationality, I think will be really crucial going forward. And those are some of the leadership skills that I really admire.
Yeah, I think surrounding yourself with talent is the real key. I mean, in the 90s, Michael Porter said, first-rate people hire first-rate people because they're worried about getting hit by a bus. Second-rate people hire third-rate people so they can feel better about themselves. And I think today that's more true than ever.
Absolutely.
But if we look at where we are today and sort of moving into this next phase of I don't want to call it economic development. Let's call it economic evolution. What leadership skills do you think are overrated?
I think the hero style of leader is overrated. A person who tries to position themselves as knowing all the answers, being the fount of all wisdom. You're never going to do that. You need to be humble enough to talk to people who are dealing with the clients. And I remember one of these sort of Barclays CEOs was great at walking into a branch, sitting on a table and just talking to the staff and saying, what are the issues here? What are the things that we need to change? How can we make your clients' life better, your colleagues and your communities? So that you need to listen and then you act on it. Because you can have the best strategy in the world. If you don't implement it, it's worthless. So having that combination of skills which allow you to pull this together, listen to people, take that on board, motivate them, and then implement, is going to be absolutely crucial.
Yeah, I think if you look at what I'll call the charismatic leader, charismatic leaders are needed, especially to sort of motivate clients, motivate employees, and that. But if they're not surrounded by the right talent, that charisma actually works against them long term. Because it isolates them, either makes them unapproachable. It changes the dynamic. One of the banks that I've worked with in the last few years does something I find extraordinary. On Fridays at noontime, the senior management team leaves their office and goes to different branches around the country and shakes hands with employees and gets to meet them. Hi, I'm the chairman of the bank, and tell me about your family and all that. The impact on morale of that is unbelievable. Everyone that I talked to in the bank, knew the CEO, the chairman, all by first name. Oh well, he came and talked to me, asked me about my son and everything, and did it increase their pay? No, but it motivated them to get on board and kind of and just. It changed the dynamic of that. In fact, one of the activities I do with senior teams in banks is I have the senior management team go and be a teller for a day at a branch. They learn more about operational problems and customer problems in that one-day experience than all the reports consultants give them about their bank and customer behavior and all of that. And we get together about a week after they do this, and the discussion is amazing, to hear, they had no idea, of what was happening within their own bank, simply because they were so detached from the reality of how the bank operates, that it changes their perspective. So I think there are some some leadership skills that we almost have to unlearn to make them, really effective.
Absolutely, and a number of great leaders who have done that, talking to people. But also, I mean, I remember when I was running in sub-Saharan Africa for Standard Chartered, going to see clients, I would learn more about what was really going on in the bank in the car driving to the client, because the client relationship officer would be saying, right, I need to tell you about a couple of things that aren't quite working. And you would learn things about what was really going on. You would learn things, those conversations, often, quite late at night or over breakfast. So, for example, when I was going out there, I'd always stay with people, because you'd have a proper chat at breakfast time or in the evening, and it's a different type of environment. You'd get some real insights about the country, about the issues, about the people, and you've got to get out of the 20th floor office. You've got to get talking to the people, you've got to get talking to the clients, and crucially, if you're going to keep the trust of your people, you've got to act on that. So when somebody tells you, whether you're in a sort of village, a hall meeting, whether it's a one-to-one, we have this big issue that needs sorting. As long as it makes sense, you have then got to deliver it, because if you don't, they'll never come to you with another idea.
Yeah, and in fact, when you were talking about Standard Chartered in Africa, I went on a journey once with Barclays Bank to Ghana, and there was 5 of us from headquarters, going there, and the 2 local bankers were with us, taking us out to this informal market. And they were saying, well, we have to tell you about this and this and how we do this SME lending and all this. And one of my colleagues turned and said, is this in the CRM system? And they looked at each other and they pulled out a notepad and said, yes. The CRM system was basically in their head and some notes that they had written down. There was no formal system in place, but they really knew their customer, because when we got there, they knew everything about those SMEs. They knew about their families, that the fact that, the one SME's son was going to university, in France and all of that. It was all in their head, and I think that's, we often don't realize, how much knowledge is kind of hidden in our organizations that we have yet to extract.
Well, I think also that's a great example. I mean, I started my career working in the Middle East, and one of the things about working in the Gulf cultures is you get to know the clients really well, and you'll talk about their families, their personal issues, their business issues, and you go from one to the other, and you build up trust that you're somebody that they want to do business with, that has their best interests at heart, and will help them in a multitude of ways on that. And that deep understanding of the client and standing in the client's shoes, I think, is something that people really need to learn. I see too many brilliant law firm partners who have a speciality, they are brilliant at it, and they go in and say, hey, I've got this speciality, do you want to buy it? Well, no, and they move on. They don't stand in the client's shoes, understand the client's issues, and both on an intellectual and an emotional level, identify with the client. And the people who do that are the ones that, 1, people trust, 2, you build a bond, and 3, they're the people you build the long-term relationships with to sort out their issues, and often identify issues they didn't even realize that you have.
Yeah, I think we really don't understand, or senior teams have a difficult time understanding the overall value of the long-term relationship versus the short-term sale. Because most of our metrics are all based on next quarter, not at customer lifetime value kinds of things. And I think that's where a lot of senior teams kind of struggle through that as a leadership problem, is how do you maintain that balance?
And it's also important for long-term success. I mean, if you want to attain immortality, you as a firm, you build those relationships, and you also, as you mentioned earlier, you develop the people so that they're the new people coming through who see that they've got opportunities. It also frees you up to do other interesting things. So yeah. You don't, it's a real core duty of leaders to develop your people to take over from you, which allows you to move on, and then gives an immortality to the firm. So it succeeds not just for the next quarter or next half year, but for the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years.
Well, I think you said something that is real important, is the immortality of the firm, not the immortality of the leader.
Absolutely.
You know, I wrote an article about a year ago looking at CEOs who are 3 years away from retirement, and they basically had two basic behaviors. There were some who just thought, I don't want to make any waves. I just want to get through my retirement and just keep the ship floating, kind of thing. And the other leader was, I want to build a legacy. I want to have an impact and all that good stuff. And there was a couple of them that are sort of in between those two dimensions. But the ones I found most interesting were the ones who suddenly realized that their immortality, was based on the long-term survival of the organization. And I thought that was a really great motivation to see, how this light bulb went off. And they said, oh, the way I'll be remembered is if this company's in business 50 years from now. And I think that's something that we rarely see today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So another question I have for you is, what leadership story have you heard during your career that you really admire? Is there someone or some leadership event that's just, every once in a while I'll hear a story and I'll sit back and I'll think, why can't I be that smart?
I think it's, well, I remember going back to again on the banking side. Standard Chartered was viewed as the burnt out bank, the banana skin bank. Any problem that hit it would be, hit Standard Chartered. And we had a new CEO who came in, who's a great guy, and he pulled together a team of people who believed in him, and he spent time with those people and made sure that people had a phone call from him. So, for example, I put some strategy papers together with some other great people, presented to the board, and he took time between the board breaking up and walking to the next door room to phone me up and say, went really well, thank you so much. That means an awful lot. But also, he set some big, big goals. And to be honest, he didn't know how we were going to attain them, but it pushed people out of that incremental box to say, right, okay, if we're going to do that, how do we take that forward? How do we reshape the way we do things, reshape our teams, develop our people to really make a difference here? And what really inspires me is being part of a team that takes a firm or a bank from here to here, and you leave that legacy. And you leave not just a legacy in terms of profits, but you leave a legacy of how people feel about the firm, feel about the bank, and a belief of moving forward. And it's that old cliche that people forget what you say, but then you never forget how you made them feel. And that feeling of being part of that team that changed a firm, that again gives it that longer term, maybe not immortality, but certainly a longer term future that helps their clients and helps them for the long term.
Yeah, in fact, it reminds me of a company I was recently dealing with, which you have to look at perspective in a very different way. They made drills to drill holes and stuff. And the example they were saying is that, the person wants to hang a shelf on the wall and they need a special drill to drill into that. And our drills can go multiple speeds. You have all kinds of different attachments and all that good stuff. And when they buy this drill, they can do this and this and this and this and this. I said, well, what does the customer want? Oh, well, the customer wants a great drill that does this. I said, no, the customer wants to put the shelf up. They just want the shelf there. They don't care about the hole it drills, and they don't care about it. They just want the shelf up. That's their objective. They were so intent on the drill, on the technology, that what they weren't focused on was the solution. The solution was the customer just wants to put a shelf up. If they could rent the drill, they would do that. They don't actually buy it. They had they didn't like the technology at all. They just want the shelf up, and I think that's what leaders need to do, is give people context like that, to really look at the customer's problem and develop the solution to that problem, regardless of what technology it is. It may be a technology you don't have. You may have to bring things together, to come up with that. But solution-based things, I think, are where we need to head today, is looking at how do we solve a client's problem instead of the latest thing we can offer.
Absolutely, because I mean, for example, nobody wants to buy a law firm services. They want to build a hotel. They want to do a merger. They want to set a will up for their children. There's a multitude. The legal side is a means to that end. And again, it's about standing in the shoes of the client. What do they want? What are they worried about? What is keeping them up at night? And when I was working on the banking side, dealing with clients, sometimes there are deeply complex issues. I remember one Swiss firm that needed to do a complex derivatives hedge of their entire Southeast Asian currencies. So I bring in the expert to do that. Another one simply wanted a bank account opened in southern China. So because he promised capital, we sorted it out. He had that bank account opened the next morning. And that meant that you were trusted to deliver. You understood what the thing was keeping the guy up at night. You understood what they really needed. And if you can deliver that, you're trusted and you can move forward. As part of that, you need to be able to conduct the orchestra, because as an individual, whether you're a chief executive, whether you're a teller on the bank floor, you don't have all the answers, all the skills, all the expertise. You have to be that director of the orchestra to pull in the right talent and to get people playing the tune together.
Yeah, and I find often, when we're looking at solution sets, we try to use technology as the sort of bandage that will fix everything, instead of listening to the customer to really develop a solution for them. And when leaders get so ingrained with a technology, it's like when all you have is a technology hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. I think listening to the customer and really understanding, how to provide a solution, which is based on a combination of things, like conducting the orchestra, bringing all that together, is the real key to leadership.
And the real strategic holy grail, if you like, is through that understanding. If, for example, you and your competitors are all playing football, but actually what the client needs is for you to play hockey. You move from that other pitch, you're playing hockey, you've got that to yourself, you can dominate that pitch, and you've moved forward. And you're not competing with your competitors in the old way, you're building a new paradigm to take that forward. And that is tough to achieve, but if you have that vision, that understanding of your clients, and crucially, you bring your people along with you, so that you're doing strategy with people, not to them, then you can build a long-term, world-beating firm, and you emerge from this whole crisis as a winner. Because one thing that I'm seeing a lot of at the moment is that the decisions that people are taking now will lead to some firms losing, some firms not existing in a few years' time, and some winning and growing fast. And there's some ambitious clients that I'm working with at the moment who are doing some extraordinary things. And I like my clients to win.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, is even in a time of crisis like we're today, opportunities arise, and being able to capitalize on those opportunities is the real key. If you look at all the crises we've had during the 20th century, they all resulted ultimately in more job creation. Yes, we lose certain kinds of jobs, we maybe certain types of skills that are no longer required or need to be modified to do something else, type of thing. But ultimately, if you can capitalize on that opportunity and people can adapt to that, then things move, continue to move. I mean, if you look back on the 20th century, we went through some pretty big crises, that had very profound impacts on how we live and how we work, and this is just another in a series of human endeavors that are going to change the way we behave long term.
Which also is one of the key people about people development, which is continually learning and being open to that. And I was talking to a group of of young associates in law firms, accountancy firms, and other professional services recently. And one of the things we were talking about was, how do they feel? Did they want to be a partner? How would they feel about that? And the general reaction of all of them was that partnership as it currently existed will not be the partnership they enter in 10 years' time if they want to do it. You know, one of the lawyers was saying, I'd like to be a legal engineer, understanding coding and bringing some of that data science to the law. So creating that model of the future and being open to that change is going to be absolutely crucial. And within that, having the experience, expertise to say, that's snake oil, but that is really, that is important. And to develop your people and to give your people the opportunities to develop in a way that will make sense in 2040 and 2050 is going to be, again, essential to that development.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, I can see our time is rapidly diminishing, but I'd like to thank you for the conversation, and hope that we can chat again in the very near future and kind of take things to another level. For those of you watching, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and we'll invite you to stay tuned next week for another one of the Møller Institute's leadership series, Insight. Thank you.